We're Greg and Leah, the host of Evolve, the #1 podcast about relationships, and not just the tender or toxic romantic ones, but all kinds of relationships with many people, places, and paths.
And we aren't here because we know or understand it all, simply because we are working to evolve and asking others to join the evolution.
So join us in this next episode of Evolve.
And welcome to another episode of Evolve with
Greg
and Leah.
I didn't know
we
you
didn't
started.
do that last week or last episode,
I didn't
did
know
we?
you started.
Oh, I forgot all about doing that. So today's our day off and we're both kind of lazy. So you said, I'm feeling very unmotivated, so let's just sit and do some recordings. So that's what we're doing. Thankfully, we had enough topics on our, to get to podcast episodes that we could just sit and be lazy and record episodes. And last episode prior to this, we were talking about our relationship to rules and programming and patterns and things like that. And I said, don't give away the next episode talking about the cells, because I've been learning something in a book I've been reading by Dr. Joe Dispenza. It's actually not a new book. It's been around a long time, but it's new to me. His book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, How to Lose Your Mind and Create a New One. And he talks about in here how our cells actually, they just have so many receptors and they perform a myriad of just features and actions and stuff all the time. But he really dives into something here, and I've shared with you a little bit. Pretty much this is how it goes. I read books and then I tell Greg about the books.
I read books by proxy.
Yeah, so he doesn't, there's a couple books you've actually read from beginning to end. I think
true.
The Four Agreements
Agreements.
But it's very small. So
The Bible.
that was big. Let's give you some credit there. It's true.
I read enough books in Bible college.
And I think you also read a lot of self-help books in the beginning and stuff like that. So,
we all know my problem with self-help books is like you read the
yeah.
first 2 chapters and you probably just could stop reading the damn book because they keep saying the whole same shit over and over. And maybe you need that repetition.
Most people do. We were just saying earlier in the other episode about programming. How are you going to rewrite the programming if you don't keep repeating things? And the way that you got the programming in the first place is repetition. It's not very rarely, though I will say there is a few times in our lives, one time someone said something and it stuck. Now, granted, it can happen, but the big things that create our patterns usually are repeated instances. But I really wanted to dive into this one. It's a little more scientific. If you ever get the book, or even just borrow it from your local library, on page 54, it'll show you the figure 3A of the cell with receptor sites as it receives vital incoming information from outside the cell. And all those signals influence how the cell performs. So something that he brings up in here, he uses the example of guilt. And he's like, just, think of someone who, struggles with guilt. Okay, so this is on page 65. I'm just going to read right from his book. It says, imagine that you frequently feel guilty about one thing or another. If something goes wrong in a relationship, simple miscommunication, someone unreasonably misplacing his or her anger on you, whatever, you wind up taking the blame and feeling bad. Picture yourself as one of those people who repeatedly say or think, it was just my fault, it's my fault. When you spend years and years, decades doing this to yourself, you feel guilty and think guilty thoughts automatically. You've created an environment of guilt for yourself. Other factors probably have contributed to this, but for now, let's just say this notion of how you're thinking and feeling have created your state of being. And every time you think a guilty thought, you've signaled your body to produce a specific chemicals that make up the feeling of guilt. You've done this so much that now your cells are swimming in a sea of guilt chemicals. And those receptors that I was talking about, those receptor sites on your cells adapt so that they can better take in and process this particular chemical expression, which is guilt. An enormous amount of guilt bathing the cells begins to feel normal to the cell. And eventually what the body perceives as normal starts to be interpreted even as pleasurable. And I'm going to stop the reading as there.
And that's exactly what happened to me in our last episode with the injustice. And
it's a little bit of a big word to use, but
the injustice that was
with the observed rule breaker. Yes.
Injustice that was done.
But what do you think is the emotion, the chemical that your cells are just like bathed in that has now become normal, but as he even says, has also become pleasurable?
Right. And I told you at that last episode, check it out if you want to hear it, where actually there is a pleasure of they broke the rule because, and maybe that's what. Well, yeah.
Maybe that's what.
I was gonna say. So that programming was stemmed from another programming. It's a repeated program, generationally speaking.
Sure.
Over and over, and.
But I think a lot of people don't realize, like, let's say they love suffering, and if you were to say to someone, I'm a life coach, so and I'm sometimes brutally honest with people, and I'm like, no, you're just entitled, and you're acting entitled. What are you going to do about it? No one owes you anything. And people sometimes, they're very shocked by my, like, brutal honesty at times. I'm not super coddling in the sense of like, oh no, you're great, you can do better. Like, I always think you can do better. I think I can always do better. But like, sometimes when I'll say something to someone, it's shocking at first. And then they'll go away and they'll be like, you know what, you're the only person who told me that. And honestly, it was the truth. I needed to hear it. But like, if I were to say to someone often, oh, you just like suffering, what's the immediate response that someone's going to be like, I don't want to suffer. I hate suffering.
Well, have you ever been with someone that every time they go to a restaurant, the steak is never the way they wanted it?
Or just they like to complain.
I'm not talking about.
Yeah.
Every they never get an order. The wait, wherever they go, it doesn't matter. They fuck up their order. Why? I don't have that problem. I don't understand.
And that's the thing. Like, to someone who is going like in that repetitive behavior, that programming, or your own behavior and programming you shared last episode,
right.
Like to someone like myself, an outsider who's not in, who that doesn't bother them, that seems silly. Why are you upset about that?
Right. And there's people that come in, and we deal with them almost repetitively here, where they come in and they have that entitlement programming in them. It's like, wait a minute, you're not any better than anybody else on this earth.
But if you were to say like something brutally honest like that, like, why do you like to suffer? Like, people will automatically be defensive and be like, I don't like to suffer. Right. I wish things were better, but they're not better.
Using the example of the restaurant thing, is they like the fact that they have to. I mean, they get enjoyment. It seems
there is a pleasure that, just like I loved when I read this, I was like, oh my goodness, that's so true. That there are certain toxic behaviors we can fall into that even though they're really bad for us, like, we enjoy them. They could be even in relationships. This is what's familiar, even though it's horrible. So I find pleasure in it to some level, and it's really a cellular level that these problems are.
How far this can go physically. We watched the other day at this particular place we were at.
Oh yeah, the drug addicts outside.
They were. I mean,
it was bad.
It was weird to watch how they were literally suffering, but there must have been an enjoyment at one time.
Like, they were irritated and yelling and screaming, and it was a good 3, 4, 5 hours straight of just this twitching somethingness. And I'm like, how can that be pleasurable?
Yeah.
But there is something that it allures them to it. But I think, just going back to this, I don't think we realize, I talked in the last episode as well, that we're 95%, and it's in this book as well, that Dr. Dispenza says
unconscious.
That you're living 95% of your life subconscious. Like, you're just not even thinking about what you're doing. So when we're in this, like, and he used this example of guilt, of just all of a sudden now it's pleasurable. It's like living for years, he says, near an airport. You get used to the noise that you no longer hear it consciously. The same thing happens to your cells. As a result, they literally become desensitized to the chemical feeling of guilt, which, and I was sharing this with you the other day, then they will start requiring stronger, more powerful emotions from you, which is a higher threshold of stimuli, to turn on next time. And every time a cell dies, and that's what he says. Why is this so hard for us to change? Because you are addicted to these chemicals that feed your cells.
So
we're all drug addicts.
If you're pointing at the person who is actually flipping out on the side of the road, you're just as bad as they are.
We're just getting our chemical fix maybe a different way from our bodies versus from an external source.
I know, like, just after the other episode. The other episode.
What?
The episode that I had.
Your episode and the other episode of the podcast.
The injustice.
Oh, stop saying that word. You're making it so much bigger. But when you get that stronger hit, he calls it, like, of guilt chemicals, it gets your body's attention. It's kind of like having that first cup of coffee when you wake up to a coffee drinker. It's what gets it going. So every time our cells divide at the end of their lives and make a daughter cell, the receptor sites on the outside of the new cell, this is what's really powerful here, is it'll require higher thresholds of guilt next time to turn them on. So every time our cells are dying and birthing new ones, creating new ones, copying new ones, the coding they get is make sure you get more of that.
So we truly are the creator of our own life, if you really think about it.
I think there's a season that we're programmed.
Yes.
But then it has to be a part of awakening. But that's where, how much of society is awakening at all?
Well, they say they are awoke by all this, I don't know.
No, we're not even talking about that kind of woke. We're talking about self-awareness.
Yeah.
Not even that kind of woke. But yeah, like the body demands stronger emotional rush of bad feelings in order just to feel alive.
And what I'm saying is you're programmed to create that. That's why you're constantly getting the bad food every time you go to this. But what about start changing that and start doing something different and making your life change?
Yeah, but you have to like know that you need to do something different first. I never knew this here until reading this book, that like every time your cells divide, they need more of that chemical. So it's like, it is a deadly spiral, so to speak, in the sense that like if you don't get a hold of this, it will only get worse. So I would dare say, even in your lineage, like we were talking in the other episode of like how your parents, how they might have been like, well, why did you do that? And same behaviors you've picked up, you might require more chemicals to feel thrilled, alive,
right,
pleasurable than they even needed.
Well, and that goes without saying everything. When you look at the original Star Wars, any kid today can look at that movie and pick out all the all the
like the special effects.
Special
like,
effects.
oh, that's lame.
Wow, people look at my first generation Star Trek and they can just laugh at the strings and the special effects, because now we are now needing better stimuli. We need
right.
It has to be spot on. And I mean, think about the old video games, Pong, and now you got games that, good God,
it's true. But then we also sometimes
there.
go through like a retro, like we like going back and like pulling out classics. But what I liked when I read this chapter about overcoming your body, of just breaking the habit of being yourself, the yourself that got programmed, I will say, and then that you kept feeding that program, breaking that is really hard. It is like getting off drugs. But once your cells are no longer getting the usual signals from the brain, so I see this behavior, I don't want this behavior, I want to change. It is really a big deal. It is like hell explodes in you. And this is why when a lot of us try to make change in our life, stress and anxiety actually goes up. Because we are so programmed to do this that our body and our cells literally say, and I'll read what he says here, like they get concerned. Before, the body and the mind were working together to produce that guilt. Now they're no longer thinking and feeling and thinking in the same way. Your intention is to produce more positive thoughts, and you shared that in the last episode. But the body is still revved up to produce feelings based on your history.
So there's where you'll get...
So you're going to have a ton of kickback from your body. And I think we've talked about this before when we've tried to change, where like it's so programmed in us that it feels like almost like explosive lava coming up from the middle of you, or like a rash. Like if you don't react your normal way, you're going to explode. It feels like.
Think about something when it's the same feeling of when you do something for the very first time, whatever it is, whether it's, going through a mountain pass in an RV.
Oh, like the exhilaration? What do you mean? Like the anxiety?
Anxiety. So that overcoming that anxiety is the...
But it's the body. And I mean, now you say, I'm going to change my thoughts. I'm going to just like look for the more positive things in people. Instead of looking for all the rule breakers, let me just look for the positive out there. But your body's memorized a certain reaction.
But yeah, so I'm not...
So even though your thoughts might be improving, your body's like, hey, we're used to reacting here. And you might even still start to have those reactions.
But it's a practice.
Right. And this is where he says, like, I'll finish what he says here. This is the kind of, it's like a highly specialized assembly line. Your brain has programmed the body to expect one part that will fit into this larger assembly. Then all of a sudden, you're now sending it a different part that doesn't fit those cells. You're sending something that the receptors are like, this doesn't fit our cells, like a square peg in a round hole kind of thing. They're going to reject it immediately. So when all of a sudden the alarms go off, the whole operation comes to a standstill. Your body and your brain are just like, what's happening here? Whoa, whoa, whoa. So he says, your cells are always spying on what's happening in the brain and the mind. Your body is always the best mind reader ever. So they all stop doing what they're doing, look up towards the brain, and they think, what's going on up there? You insisted on being guilty. We have loyally followed your commands for years. We've subconsciously memorized a program for guilt for your repetitive thoughts and feelings. We changed our receptor sites to reflect what you wanted, and now you're not giving it to us. I mean, I love that he gives like such personality to cells. But like, in a sense, that's what's happening is they freeze because you've sent them a square peg for a round hole.
So
the hole that you've asked for.
If you're going to try to reverse this cycle, and it's like I said, I'm going to start picking out things that people are doing right. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, you don't go to the gym, and if you're 100 pounds, go to the bench press for the very first time,
try 500 pounds,
and try to
yeah,
press 100 pounds. You're gonna have to find out
you're gonna
first.
Have to start a little small.
Well, even if you've never been to the gym, you better figure out where your weight class is at. What are you at? And so there's an evaluation process that'll have to be done here before you were saying in the last episode, like, how do you change? Well, yeah. So there's going to have to be some type of reprogramming, and it has to be in incremental steps based on your ability.
Well, and that's where something that if you listen to any probably Joe Dispenza meditation, he starts with, first just focusing on yourself, your space you take up in space, and then the space around you, which seems like hard to wrap your brain around. For me, it was at first. But then he also asks you to visualize what it is you want. Okay, you don't want to be that person anymore. Who do you want to be? Because if you don't know who you want to be, you mentioned an example previously. If you take that old record off, you have to replace it with something. You're used to music. You're not going to just cold turkey cut off the music. What are you replacing it with? And if you don't have that image of who I want to be, you're never going to be that person. So yes, get yourself in a meditative state, like meditate about this, really get into yourself. Who do I want to be instead? And then he says, all right, let's go back to who you are that you don't like, in a sense. Let's talk about and focus on the behaviors you want to change, so that when they rise up, you can immediately recognize them and say, nope, change. And he actually says, just use the word change. Because just doing that, your brain will be like, it's like a big red light, stop, no more just default emotions, no more pre-programmed, like, something has to be different here. We're going to turn left instead of right like we normally do. But I think that helps. It's locating where you're at, putting some kind of stop light to stop yourself from reacting so that you can now say, no, we're going to be this instead.
And when you do that, you just mentioned, the whole universe is going to be under attack at you, your body and everything else.
Oh, sure. And even people in your environment.
It's like
that's not you.
When you said that, it's like I remember the time I was coming back from Orlando and got working for
another pest control company.
Yeah, another pest control company, and I had to clean up my act a lot, and so I stopped drinking and smoking.
So everyone around you was like, hey.
And like, at the time of my life, I was the one that always had the weed and the alcoholic beverages. So everybody's over at my house. And all of a sudden now...
You find out who your friends are when you stop doing these things.
One thing is like, wait a minute. I stopped and I'm not going to do it. All of a sudden my friends who never had their shit, all of a sudden, hey, I just got this kick-ass Maui Wowie, come on over. It's like, God damn it, you never had weed when I was smoking, but now you got weed when
I thought you were going to say, like, more like people were upset that you stopped. And, like, I've had this happen if I'm trying to improve and someone will be like, oh, you're holier than thou now.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, oh, my gosh. I mean, I guess you find out where people really are. And I've seen that even in relationships, that, like, one party will start improving and the other one starts actually getting worse.
Yeah.
And then they'll start poking at the other one. And I mean, I've done it to you at different times.
One person goes on a diet and starts looking good, and the other person gets fat.
wants to mock them or, sabotage them.
Right.
But I mean, what he's saying is it's happening in ourself. Our own bodies are saying, listen, you made us this way. And now you're asking for something different.
Right.
I don't think so. So the hypothalamus, he said, will signal, the thinking brain to revert back to its old ways. So it's like, it is a battle. Change is not easy. And he said this is the slow track because it takes longer for the chemicals to circulate through the bloodstream. The body wants you to return to your memorized chemical self So it tries to influence you to think in the familiar routine ways. It activates all that entire assembly line, as he called it, to get back to what was familiar. And it's so much work involved here.
Well, it's like water. We watch the water flow down the mountains, and unless you redirect it, you gotta, like that one place we're at yesterday, they worked hard to build the rocks around the reserve,
right,
to get
control
the water,
where the
to
water
control
they wanted
that
it to
water.
go. Right.
Other than that hard work, and now that it's done, the water just continues to flow where they want it to go.
But the initial process of the hard work,
the initial
is a lot.
damming of that water had to be treacherous work. In some places, it had to have cement so that it would stay, because it kept
washing away. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, and that's what he says here. Like when this starts happening, he says you'll start to hear chatter thoughts in your head because you're trying to change. So you'll hear things like, "Oh, you're too tired today. How about we start tomorrow? Tomorrow's a better day. Really, we can just do it later." Or this doesn't feel right. Like, because it is so foreign for you to try to change. And then he said, if that doesn't work, a second sneak attack will occur. The body-mind wants to be in control again, so it starts picking on you a bit. Like, tell me if this has ever happened to you. Like, it'll say things like, it's okay for you to feel bad right now. Like, this situation justifies it. Like, it's someone else's fault.
It's not gossip if I tell my wife.
Right. Don't feel bad about what you did in your past. Like, well, in fact, let's take a look at your past so we can remember why you're this way. Let's, oh, you're such a loser. Oh, you're pathetic and weak. Your life is a failure. You'll never change. You're too much like your mother. Why don't you just quit? Like, this is what starts happening when we try to make change.
And if you could sit there right now and say, I have never had these, man, I know for a fact that I have had these
all of us
thoughts
have.
that come at you like a crowd, and you're on a stage listening to, or sometimes the thoughts are over you, just overcoming you until you can get above them. But geez, yeah,
he calls it awfulizing. And I like that word. Like, are you awfulizing? And it's true, because it's like the body's tempting the mind to return to the state that it's unconsciously memorized. And on a rational level, that is just crazy. It's absurd. You're just thinking like, no way. But obviously on some level, it just does feel good to feel bad. Like we talked about before. So,
well, I'm thinking about the person that, like I said, that always upset with the order that's brought to them. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to analyze, do they pre-think that? Oh, I'm not going to have a good meal. Because I don't pre-think, oh, I'm going to have a good meal until I see someone complaining about their meal. I'm thinking, I never have a problem with the meal. So is it just a programming or a lack of program, or something that's been programming so long, they don't even realize that they're thinking...
You're just thinking that that's their only issue. That's the leaf of the tree. The root of the problem is, I enjoy this suffering.
Yeah,
they're just
suffering.
You're using meal over there, where yours is following the rules, where mine is like, I don't know. Do I have problems? No. I have no problems. I can overcome anything.
Problems
anytime.
Walking on a path. That's what you.
Hey. So I guess it boils down to, how do we help ourselves? Like the Jerry Maguire, help me, help you. One of my favorite movies back then. But he says, as long as we're using those familiar feelings as the barometer, as our feedback on the efforts to our change, we'll always talk ourselves out of new possibilities. And that's true. So if you're allowing your body and or the thoughts that are familiar to be like, oh yeah, it's not, the change isn't working. It's not working. You're not going to be able to move forward. So help is only a thought away, he says. The next step in breaking a habit of being ourselves is understanding how important it is to get the mind and body working together to break the chemical continuity of guilt, shame, anger, depressed, whatever that state of being you're in. Resisting the body's demand to restore the old unhealthy order is not easy, but help is only a thought away. You will learn in the following pages that for true change to occur, it's essential to unmemorize. Is that even a word? Unmemorize? An emotion that has become part of your personality, and then recondition the body to a new mind. It's easy to feel hopeless when we realize that the chemistry of our emotions has habituated our bodies to a state of being that is too often a product of anger, jealousy, etc. After all, I've said that these propensities are programmed into our subconscious. But the good news is that we can become consciously aware of these tendencies. So do you have any thoughts or feedback before we move on? No? Does it make sense? Like, do you see that this is something that truly
Oh,
sets
absolutely.
us back,
Yes,
and
definitely.
like this pattern that we kind of just keep going in. And honestly, there's so much to his answers that I would say, get the book, dive into it yourself. Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, How to Lose Your Mind and Create a New One is huge, because all of it, I think you said something the other day, like, we create our whole world, we create our reality. But I can say, even just as someone in the past, when someone has told me that, I've gotten defensive, and I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I've had such bad things happen to me.
Right.
I have not had it. It's not been fair. It's not been right. It's all been wrong. Like, I had no control over what happened to me and how it happened. And like, I feel powerless, but I can also get addicted to victim chemicals.
That's the power. That's
Yeah,
the programming that you have given yourself, just like, or that you've accepted, or not necessarily accepted. That was given to you as a child. I mean, and you said too, like, you get to a place where, all right, now it's time for me to start programming me, and there's going to be a lot of unprogramming to do first.
Absolutely, yeah. But I think I won't dive too much deeper in, because it does get like a lot deeper in here for sure. But it's really truly just changing the power of our thoughts, and realizing. I don't know. I feel like for me, him connecting the dots between my thoughts and my body, for me, is very helpful, because I'm someone who's always been body aware. Like, since I met you were like, oh my God, what are you talking about? Like, because I was like, don't you ever like notice this with your finger? And you're like, no, I've never paid attention to my body. I would probably say more people are in your shoes than mine. They're not very body aware. They're not noticing that, like, that connection to, I'm driving to work and I have to have a difficult conversation and I now have stomach and gut issues.
Right.
They're not relating a lot of the things that are physically happening to them to what's emotionally, mentally happening to them.
A lot of the phrases that we use, we don't even know. Having cold feet. Yeah.
Butterflies in your stomach.
Your stomach, or his head's in the clouds. I mean, just all these things.
They're body, mind, state of beings.
Yeah.
And but for me, learning this was helpful, because then I feel like I can realize, okay, if this is happening, I'm having this like reaction when I'm trying to make change in my life. I understand now it's happening at a cellular level. I have control over what I want to feed my cells. We've talked about this, like, with diet and nutrition. You said, even I think in the beginning of this episode, of just like, if you want to be healthy or fit, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to make changes.
Well, like,
physically,
my son and I are going to the gym quite often, and it makes no sense to do that and not come, like he would say, now we got to come home and feed our muscles. We got to feed our muscles the good things in order for us to continue on. And it's funny that I've noticed, and I've worked out on and off all my life, but when you start working out and exercising, all the other things start coming into play. Like, they follow suit. It's kind of hard to go to the gym and actually work out. I see quite a few people come to the gym and
my level of workout, we're like,
more time on their
two,
every set. They're on their
take a
phone.
break.
It's kind of funny. Me and Joshua laugh. It's like 15 minutes. That's it.
Hey,
wow!
But I will say, start small.
And I even said,
you don't know where they're at in their process.
True. That's so true.
So
oh my gosh,
judgmental.
It's true.
Next episode, all about our relationship to criticism and judgment.
God, I'm so ashamed.
That's the thing. We don't know where someone else is at.
It's
just
true.
You worry about yourself.
I did say that. At least they're at the gym.
Yeah, right.
How many people are not even, and they're not even at the gym.
Yeah, they don't even make the time or space. And but yeah, like, starting small and those small tidbits. But for me, I feel like it's empowering in the fact that, like, I don't know, I talk to everything. I've shared this in other episodes. Talk to animals, talk to nature, trees, rocks, water. I talk to it all, always have. I now can come to a place that feels like I can talk to my cells and say, I know you used to get that. And I know that felt really good. But I want something different, and I want something better for us.
You're just going to have to calm the hell down, man.
You have to sit down, shut up, and maybe you have to be firm. Like, maybe you have to be firm.
I probably
with that.
do.
You have very aggressive cells.
So I have a question then.
Uh-oh.
If you can talk to your cells and tell them what to do, then why can't you talk to your sickness or your disease that you you say that you have.
You
or
can. I mean, that's the
and that's
same
what I'm
thing.
saying. Tell your cancer to fuck off.
Yeah,
And
he actually, I mean, that's what Joe Dispenza does. A lot of people have healed their
Tell
own
your
cancer
sense-
by changing their thoughts. And
tell your cancer to fuck off.
he talks about epigenetics and what that actually is, because we've been programmed like, oh, if it's in your genes, your family history,
Right.
oh, you're destined to have it. And he's like, absolutely
Put
no.
your foot down and say no. That's
You
not how
have
it's
the
going
power
be.
to rewrite your cells. So when we have these setbacks, or when we maybe not setbacks, let me say this: when we choose we want to change, start talking to your cells and saying, you have the authority. You are not your thoughts,
Well,
but you
and
have
that's-
control over your thoughts,
and
and
that's
you
what
can choose what you want to.
What you're saying is
tell your cells.
Start telling, instead of them telling you, you tell them.
But here's what, like I just read, like I loved how he gave him a personality with a voice and everything. Is like, hey, you made us this way.
All right.
Like, hey, give us what we asked for, what you asked for. And I mean, talk gently to your body at the same time. Like, I know I asked for that. And I know maybe it served me for a time. I appreciate that you are so obedient, that you did everything I asked. But guess what? We're going to do this now instead. And really, truly love your body and accept and appreciate and value it and talk to it like your best friend. I mean, sometimes we talk to ourselves so much worse than we would our best friend or like a mother or a loved one. Like, it's just like we put ourselves down, we defeat ourselves, we sabotage ourselves. But if you were like, I'm a life coach, I would not do that to someone. No. They wouldn't come back very much, or unless they loved punishment. Yeah. Unless they were used to that familiar, like, put down, sabotage, horrible, toxic environment. But I would never say that to someone. Why do we say those things to ourselves? You're never going to do this. You're never going to make it. And your cells in your body all start doing what you say. So
what I saw a sign, I'm sure everybody's heard this, is the person who says they can and the person that says they can't
they're both right.
They're both right.
They are, and it's 100% truth. So I loved this this part of the book. I have so much more to go through, but I will say, because it is so deep, that it truly, I need to take it in bite sizes. Like you just said about the gym and not being judgmental about people at the gym. Maybe
True.
they are only lifting 2 pounds.
Well, I
versus the guy who's been there for 10 years lifts 200 pounds.
Well, and it's
or 800 pounds.
Relevant, because there's the guy that walks by me that's like what I would like to look like.
And he's probably like, oh, that guy, oh my God.
He's there 3 hours, and I'm only there an hour and 15 minutes sometimes.
And I work out for 15 minutes at a time. I mean, so that's where, like, you have to do what you have time for. Make time for small bites.
Right.
And truly from there, your bites can get bigger. And as it starts having positive effects on your body and your mind and your mental health and your state of being, you will want to make more time for positivity and for productiveness in your life. And instead of the programming controlling you, you're now writing the programming, and you're having so much fun being a programmer of yourself, your life, etc. So I hope that helped. Our rec today is definitely this book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza, or probably any of his books or any of his YouTube stuff would just be a great place to start. I would love to hear if you have, any listeners have, other insights, other books to recommend. Put them in the comments, like, share, subscribe. Do you have any thoughts before we close?
No, not at all. Actually.
Is it empty up there?
It's empty today.
I told you, we're just lazy and just sitting here hitting record. So until next time, everyone, be evolving and truly start talking to your cells like you would your best friend. And, let them know, like, I know we might have done things differently before, but this is how I want to do them now. And you have to know what you're heading towards. Just like with you, with reprogramming. What are you heading? You say, I want to be Zen Greg, but who's Zen Greg? And really defining that for yourself. And each of us defining what is that successful milestone we're reaching for, or we're not going to reach it if it's not defined. If it's very foggy, unclear, I don't know. I just want to be better.
Okay.
And until next time, that's all for now. Thank you for listening. Click subscribe.
You already said all that.
And
just stop talking.
And what's the thing you want to say?
Be evolving. I don't know.
Yeah, he doesn't even know. That's how lazy he is today. Be evolving, people.